All right. So friends, it's great to be here today to get a chance to chat with you. I want to say hi to the folks who are here. Anyone joining us online, you are more than welcome to text me throughout the service. We do this a lot at New Church Live. You can only text me appropriate things, though. And phone number is 215-740-3662. What we're going to do is, actually, this is going to be a lot of really... Pardon?
And who are you?
I am Chuck Blair of New Church Live. I'm the visiting lecturer here today, and it is wonderful to be part of this great program. And what the program today, we're going to look at the covenant, and we're going to look at the balances in the covenant, and we're actually going to have a fair amount of conversation. So I'm a conversational sort of person. So that's going to be the flavor of today. And what I'd like to do is start out with this very simple question. Who was the best boss you ever had? And if you're sitting beside her or him, that's fine. And who was the best boss you ever had? And if you never had a boss, you're always self-employed, think of the best teacher. And then share why. So who was the best boss and why? So please pair up with someone around you and share that. Who was the best boss you ever had? And the second question is why? Please share. Another 30 seconds here, folks. All right, friends. So it is an interesting question, isn't it? And the best bosses we have, they tend to function with this beautiful sense of balance. And I've been privileged to work with and be with a number of really great bosses. I was thinking today, getting ready for today's talk, one of the better little leadership moments I saw. I loved sports, loved sports. I played lacrosse, and we had beaten a team that we should have beaten by a lot, but we beat them by a little bit. And the coach calls us over, and, I'm the captain. I'm thinking I'm going to get yelled at. And he gets like, gentlemen, I just want to tell you, it takes a really good team to play that poorly and still win. And it was such a beautiful balance. Because in one hand, he's saying, like, you guys are not doing the way you could. And at the same time, he has compassion. It was interesting, that word compassion showing up. And that's so much the covenant. And you can look at the covenant up here, and let's hold it up here, but let's also look down to how we can live it. Like, what does it look like to live the balance? What does it look like to live the covenant? Because the covenant always has this beautiful both and. Think of the way the covenant works. 10 commandments, beatitudes, that shift. One is the law. Most famous 3 words in the 10 commandments. Somebody say them. Thou shalt not, right? Which is great, terrific. And then the beatitudes. What's the one-word summary of the beatitudes? Blessed. Thou shalt not and blessed. Again, two very different perspectives. But the fact is the covenant includes both. It includes law and it includes love. And it's very easy in our lives to kind of veer, and Guard's question was kind of getting at this. We kind of want to veer to one or the other. We know lots of people who are way in the law lane. Sort of kill them all, let God sort them out. That doesn't work terribly well. And we know people as well who are totally in the love lane. And that sometimes can miss as well. Because we actually need to have both. It was interesting, just even with the law one, my beautiful wife and I, we were privileged to travel to South Africa, preach down there. They have a huge problem with law. It's scary down there. You literally cannot go out on a walk. We're down there and we're at a restaurant and my wife puts her phone down, somebody runs past, grabs her phone. And we're in a foreign country. That's terrifying. And it's terrifying living that way. The couple we stayed with, they had 4 adult children. All of their adult children had been carjacked. So the idea that law doesn't matter, it's not really true. Like a river without banks is a puddle. We have to have banks. And we also have to have love. And somehow the covenant has to be able to hold both. And is that possible? Well, I think from a new church perspective, the obvious answer is, friends, yes, it's very possible. Take a look at this video. You folks ready with the video there in the back? There we go. Take a look at this video to see how both come together.
Sometimes the best way to help someone who has fallen into a hole is not to throw them a rope, but to climb in. Steve Hartman learned this on the road.
Inside the county courthouse in Fayetteville, North Carolina, Judge Lou Oliveira made headlines with an unusual decision.
You may be seated.
A few years ago, Joe Cerna was arrested for drunk driving. As part of his probation, he wasn't allowed to drink. So when he lied about a recent urine test, the judge felt he had no choice.
I gave Joe a night in jail because he had to be held accountable.
It was just one night, but as he entered the cell, Joe says he knew it would be one of the longest nights of his life.
When I walked into the jail cell and they closed the door behind me, I started feeling this anxiety.
It came back?
It came back, a flashback.
Retired Army Sergeant First Class Joe Cerna did 3 tours in Afghanistan and has 2 Purple Hearts to show for it. The Green Beret survived an IED and a suicide bomber. But he says his scariest moment was the night he was riding in a truck with 3 other soldiers.
What happened?
We were following the creek, and the road gave way. And the vehicle went in the creek.
Truck started filling with water?
Yeah. All hope was lost.
Trapped and unable to move, Joe felt the water rising, past his legs, then waist and neck, until finally it stopped at his chin.
How many guys got out of that truck?
Alive?
Yeah.
Just me. I was a sole survivor.
Joe says it still haunts him.
So I suffer from PTSD.
Among his issues,
Then I would drink.
a fear of being in small, cramped places.
I knew what Joe was going through, and I knew Joe's history, and he had to be held accountable, but I just felt I had to go with him. I felt I had to go with him.
And so, a few minutes after Joe was locked up, Judge Lou Oliveira surprised the man he sent to jail by joining him for the entire night.
We ate meatloaf, and we talked about a lot of things.
We talked about our families.
And the walls got further apart?
The walls just got, they didn't exist anymore. He brought me back to North Carolina from being in a truck in Afghanistan. That meant so much to me, sir.
I know.
This week, Joe promised the judge no more mess-ups.
I don't want to let you down, ever.
It's not how law and order usually works.
Right, sir.
But sometimes jail is not what a man needs. Sometimes the best sentence
Love you. I love you.
is compassion.
Thank you for breathing me.
Steve Hartman, on the road, in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And compassion heals.
Let's give that a round of applause. That is a great video. So I'd love for you to get back with the person you were talking to, and just what's your reaction when you see that? What's your reaction? What are you thinking? What is it showing to you? Again, coming through with that balance. Please share with a friend. It's spectacular. You know that guy. And you had it all set up. That's why when you said compassion, I was thinking, that's it. And you know what compassion literally means? Compassion means to suffer with.
What is it?
To suffer with. So passion, like
with,
passion
yeah.
of Christ. It's when you can literally, in an empathetic way, suffer with someone. Powerful stuff. And beautiful balance. He still had to spend the night in jail.
I wonder, because this is the cynic in me, I wonder if the judge would have come up with that idea if he wasn't dealing with such a hero.
That's a great question.
If it was just a bum off the street.
Yeah. I would say it's starting somewhere.
Yes, at least. Because that guy didn't deserve a hard sentence compared to others.
But I think he's also he's seeing the bigger picture. It's not just this one act. That there's a whole cycle that goes around. And yeah.
We're never our worst moment.
We're
ever.
never that.
We're never our worst moment.
And we are, but yet, because of circumstances of that worst moment, yes, unfortunately, how people sometimes view our viewers. I mean, it's like the drug trial.
Folks, another 30 seconds. I'm going to steal this pen if that's all right. Oh, thank you. We appreciate it. All right, friends, let's get started here. That's just such an incredible video in so many ways, and it's one I use a lot with teaching, because I think it just shows like this both and, right? I'm going to share with you some. I'm going to share it a number of times. Tensions we manage, problems we solve. Can we say that together? Tensions we manage, problems we solve. And there's always this tension between law and love. There always is. And it's not something that we ever solve, but it's something that we're asked to keep on working with. So I'd love to just open the floor. Was there any reactions? That a lot of you folks said beautiful things. I mean, we could have done a whole sermon off of just what you said. What were some things that the video brought up for you that you'd like to share with the group? Tears. Yeah, absolutely tears. That. Oh, sorry. There we go. Sorry, my bad.
I was waiting to see if it would just be one word. And
Mike?
before someone's going to speak a while.
Yeah, basically, it showed that the judge was more interested in the person rather than punishing.
Yeah.
Because punishing people doesn't necessarily change things. It can harden them instead of becoming a better person.
Yeah. As you were saying, Joy, I was thinking of the famous, I love Les Mis. I'm a sucker for Les Mis. If any of you get on my bad side, give me tickets to Les Mis and we're all good. And Les Mis, the miserable police officer, right? He's religiously driven. But it's all about punishment. All about punishment. All about punishment.
The other thing that struck me was that that person was, he felt seen.
He felt seen.
And that, I have to say, that is one of the things that is most powerful in relationships. Even when you're having trouble, that if you can feel seen, you can engage. You won't run away because someone knows who you are.
Yeah. And that idea, when we can truly cherish people, right? When we see them, we cherish them. It'll always give them a place, a home to return to. Other ones out there? Jen?
It reminded me a lot of parenting when your child goes through something and you have to give them a consequence because they need to learn and be accountable. Yet sometimes I feel at the same time so bad for them and the pain they're feeling from the consequence. And I know what it felt like when I was their age. So you can feel both at once.
Yes. And I think that's beautifully said. You know, in that idea, there's again attention we manage. And it's, you know, thank goodness that it's attention we manage. Thank goodness that it feels uncomfortable, because if it didn't, what would that mean, you know, about us as a parent? Any other ones out there, friends? All right. So when we look at this idea of tensions we manage, I want to talk for a minute about the book of Jeremiah. And the book of Jeremiah sort of spells this out. And isn't it interesting that these books, prophets, right? The prophetic books of the Bible, they always have the same thing. Always have the same theme, every single one of them. Painful rebuke, unwavering hope. Painful rebuke, unwavering hope, which is kind of an interesting admixture in many ways. And that idea, friends, that Jeremiah has it, and it's interesting when we look at Jeremiah, you'll see Jeremiah quoted over and over again, but it's always the same quote. You know, nobody quotes the really harsh stuff. And we actually see who knows their Bible. We actually have a name we use in English for the really harsh stuff. When somebody really goes off, what is it called? Any of you ever heard the word Jeremiad? So when you really go to town on somebody, that's known as a Jeremiad. So it's interesting because here's this Jeremiad part, and at the same time, friends, listen to this line. The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their ancestors when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they broke my covenant, though I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. This is the covenant I will make with the people of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will, listen to this line here, friends. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. Notice that. I will put my law in their minds, and I will write it on their hearts. No longer will they teach their neighbor or say to one another, know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more. Think of the power of that, friends. And I want to talk for a minute here about shifting into, like, again, how can we live this? How can we take these higher ideals, walk down the steps, and live it on this earthly plane? When you think about some of the hardest days in your life, some of the hardest days, what helped? I'm just going to throw that out there to the audience. What helped? What helped? And if you want to be real specific, we could all go around. I'm not going to have you do this, but we all have something that as soon as I say this, something will come to mind. The worst day of your life. We all have it. What helped you at that day? Being heard. Being heard. Beautiful. Being heard. Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. Right. My bad. We need lots of practice with this. Okay.
Being when my David died.
Yeah. Another one, friends?
Calling a friend.
Calling a
just
friend.
to let them know what's going on.
Yeah.
They don't have to say anything. They don't have to do anything, but you need to let somebody know.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Letting somebody know. That idea of connection. Another one, friends? Out there? All right. So now let's take it to a second layer here. We're talking relational pieces there. What was something that someone told you at that worst moment that made a huge difference? And I'll give you an example from my personal life experience. I had a really, really rough experience. Young adult died. I had to tell their parents about it. I've had to do that a number of times as a pastor. There are a few things as devastating than telling a parent that their child has passed away. Devastating moment, and I went to see a therapist because it was so incredibly difficult. Like I literally felt like I was becoming unmoored. I couldn't think. Felt like I couldn't move. Felt literally like life was underwater, and all the voices, strange kind of voices you might hear underwater. That's what other people talking felt like. And I thought, I think I'm going. Literally, I thought I was going crazy. And what he told me at that moment is he said, Chuck, you need to remember your life will never be the same again after going through this. Friends, that was such a relief. Like, because I was constantly trying to get back to a life that had happened before then. And it's Nora McInerney. Anybody familiar with Nora McInerney at all? She spoke at New Church Live, TED Talk person, wonderful, wonderful speaker. She said, what we have to learn to do is we need to get that grief is something we move forward with, not something we move past. Love that idea. That literally was life-saving for me, that piece of advice. So what were some pieces of advice out there? And raise your hand and we'll send you the mic. What were some pieces of advice that people gave you that were particularly helpful?
This too will pass.
This too will pass. Yep, the seasonality. Another one, friends?
When someone's throwing something at you that you don't like, you don't have to catch the ball.
Right. Oh, shoot. That is a good one. One more, friends? Anybody else? All right. So the point of sharing that part is to say again, like the covenant, friends, it has to show up in two ways. And this is where I think it's tricky to try to live these things, because God's asking us to live this both and. He's asking us to live the law and asking us to live love. And this is my own little thing. You're welcome to disagree with me. I think we've gotten to a time where we're so afraid of offering advice that we don't say anything. I mean, I see that all the time in parishioners, like, Chuck, I don't know what to say. And so they don't say anything. So somebody dies and they don't say anything to the person about losing a loved one. Is that the right answer? No. Of course you're going to say the wrong thing on occasion. Of course. My 2 cents is it's better than saying nothing. That idea of the balance, right? That we need this constant balance of what are we going to offer here. Now again, it's not like God's law, but there's these little parts of law, these little tiny like flickers of law that we can offer to them. Love wins. You're going to be okay. There's going to be a tomorrow. Those little pieces can be so important, as well as the ministry of presence. And when we can offer that both and, then we're taking this covenant that's so big and we're actually living it in very real, very, very ways that have a lot of purchase into the world. And those bits, friends, when we can live in that space of offering that both and, it gives us a totally different idea of covenant. I want to share with you a story, and it's a story of a couple that I thought was living the covenant in both this very material way and this very heavenly way. They were pulling the two together. I got this quote from a book. This quote from Heaven and Hell 356. There is an inner and an outer person as distinct from each other as heaven and the world. They must become one in the person to be truly human. So there's this idea of heaven and the world, and kind of how do we live that. One of the things that really has been big for me this year is that I think the new church has a very unique view of heaven. That heaven is not a place as much as it is a practice. Yes, it's a place. Yes, there's heaven there and then. But it's a practice. As in heaven, so upon the earth. Jacob's ladder. What directions did the angels go? Yeah, not up and down. Down and up. Down and up. Isn't that fascinating? And so when we get a chance to see this covenant and we see people living the covenant, and that's why, again, like I think we're not supposed to hold the covenant out there, like here's this document out there and it's labeled the covenant and that we kind of sign our agreement to it. No, your signed agreement to it is your life. You signing off is you living it. And that's going to mean that you're going to have this balance all the time. And it's going to be a tension you manage, not a problem you solve. Example, story of Brody, one of my favorite stories. Privileged to have worked with the Ronald McDonald House Charities for a long time. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Ronald McDonald House, there's two of them in Philadelphia, actually started in Philadelphia. They're homes where kids who are sick, have cancer, etc., the families can come there, they stay there while the kids get treatment. Amazing organization. And the beautiful part of it is that you go in and you cook meals, and then after you cook the meals, the best part is you eat with the families. And these conversations, like nobody wants to talk about the Phillies, believe it or not. What? Exactly. Like, what's up with that? Hard to imagine. Because their kids have cancer. The Phillies don't matter a lick anymore. So you get into these very rich conversations in all of like 2 minutes. Because they just don't have time. They don't have time. So this conversation, I think for most of us in our lives, we probably have 4 or 5 times where we've had a conversation or an interaction that's been life-changing. And this one makes my top 5. I think it'll be my top 5 till the day I die. So we cook the meal, we go down, we sit down with this family. I sit down with this couple. And it was a much older couple, early 70s with looked like a 2-year-old boy. Now, the 2-year-old boy was in a special wheelchair. He was nonverbal. He was diapered. Clearly, profoundly handicapped little boy. And his name happened to be Brody. And so I sit down, and who am I imagining these 70-year-olds are? Who would you imagine they are? Grandparents. Wrong answer. They adopted the kid. Not even related. Not even related. They had found out that he was being abused at home, and they knew with his medical condition he only had a couple of years, and their part of the covenant was that they were going to give him a good couple of years. And this is where the story got humorous and true and human. So the man who looks like the grandfather, he's got gray hair. He looks sort of like, he looks like Grandpa Moses. He's got big gray hair, gray beard. He is tattooed from here to here on both arms, what they call sleeves. He's got sleeves going. And I'm chatting with his wife, and I asked her, I said, well, what do you guys do for fun? Trying to make a little small talk after we've had this big conversation. And yeah, because I'm a pastor. And she said, oh, we ride Harleys. Oh, boy. It was great. So I asked, when was the last time you rode your Harleys? And friends, I kid you not, to this day, she got one of the most beautiful smiles I've ever seen. And she points over at that wheelchair, And she went, Chuck, that's our Harley now. That's the covenant. That's it. Yeah. I mean, does it get better than that? Like, I'm stunned even saying it. Because that's the lived covenant. That's the mixture of, like, they're going to do what they can do. That's the law part. But then there's this deep love, and they're marrying the two together. And ready for this, friends? They lived in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. They were driving the whole way to Philadelphia, which is further than I drove to get to this place, much further. And I drove a long time. It's much further. Just so over the 2 years, he could have some surgeries that relieved a little bit of his suffering. And who was paying for it? They were. And you know what he did? He installed windows. Yeah. That's the real deal. Now, does it mean that it always works the way we want it to do? Yes or no? Is it always going to work the way we want it to? No. No, it won't. And that's where, again, as we're trying to live the covenant, don't forget the parable of the sower. How many different kinds of soil were there? It's sort of like, 4. I think it was like really crappy, sort of crappy, okay, really good. Like, there's just all these different kinds of soil. And I used to read that back in the day in my own young adult hubris of thinking, well, that means I must test to see what is the appropriate soil. I must only plant where it is appropriate. Is that the meaning of that parable? No. What's the meaning of the parable, friends? Scatter the seeds. You don't know. You're not in charge. The only thing God is asking of you is to plant the seeds. And remember this famous quote. It's a beautiful, beautiful quote. This famous quote. You can count the number of seeds in the apple. You can never count the number of apples in the seed. You don't know. You don't know. Now, if I were to say, how can we find ways, in a very real, sorry about dropping this, in a really tangential way about getting ourselves ready to understand this covenant, I think with understanding this covenant, I think we have to do two things. I think we have to make sure that we're both right-sized and inspired. Now, the right-size bit, isn't it interesting? Going back to Sage's beautiful talk yesterday where she's talking about the stars of the sky, right? How many of you have ever been humbled looking up at the, right? Right? Now, notice, friends, that's humility, not humiliation. If you look up at the stars and you feel humiliation, take a look at that, see a pastor. But if you look up at the stars and you feel humility, you're getting it. You're getting it. That humility is so incredibly important, where we shrink ourselves to the right size. Carl Jung famously said, I want to climb down ladders to this little clod of earth that I am. That doesn't mean that little clod of earth is not beautiful. It's incredibly beautiful. And keep it right-sized. Because when we do that, when we get ourselves right-sized, and then we slide that right sizing across into our lives, what do we find? We find wonder. We find awe. When I'm filled with my own ego, nothing is really wonderful. I don't stand there looking at the stars. I don't sit out there thinking, wow, the world is so much more beautiful than what I ever could imagine. You just can't be in that place. And isn't it interesting, friends, as we do this, that idea of getting right size, so we get right size so we can slide across and find this idea of wonder and awe, and that's where the inspired parts works. Just look at the word inspired. Spiritus. Spiritus, what does it mean? Spirit, God, wind, all the same word. So when you are inspired, you are allowing God's breath to come in. Think about that for a minute. Little aside, I find it really interesting that we don't actually inhale air. You do know that, right? We don't. It comes in. The pressure outside your lungs is greater than the pressure inside your lungs. So when you create the space, that's a breath. Think about that for a minute. Yeah. I think God's trying to tell us a little something there. So when we do that, friends, right-sized and inspired, we get to see this idea, and it just lands so differently, that we are beloved children of God. Beloved. And it's not beloved that's based on this ego up here. I mean, I've had so many times where people have come to see me as a pastor and be like, boy, if I just felt good about myself. And that's true, and I wish everybody feels good about themselves. But the answer isn't feeling good about yourself. The answer is when you stop asking that question. Where I'm no longer worried about feeling good about myself or not. I'm just being. Taking a trip to New Mexico to just be. That simple. And with that, friends, you know, as we do that, I think it echoes, again, the whole baptismal part. I love the story of Jesus' baptism. I didn't know this until just relatively recently. But for Christians, what was the one time a year they got baptized? Anybody remember ancient Christians? It was Easter. And a lot of the time, what did they get baptized in? A sarcophagus. There's one up at Glencairn Museum. Because Jesus, it was a full body immersion. In other words, there was a dying. There was a right sizing. There was something needed to go. So that the words, "You are my beloved son, my beloved daughter, in whom I am well pleased," could actually be heard. And the ministry could start from that point. So friends, the summary of this is really simple. The covenant is this beautiful intellectual thing. And we can look at it, we can understand it. It's got lots of beautiful parts to it. And the most significant thing that we can do is to live it. To live it. And that means living the tension of law versus love. Not trying to parse out which one is greater. They're both incredibly important. They're both ways that help us to move forward in life. And just live it. Just find a way to live it. Amen. Thank you, folks. All right, so we're going to have questions, is that right?
I just want to refer back to the movie for a minute, because one of the things that struck me was when the gentleman who was in the cell, and when the judge went in with him and they talked, he said he felt the cell walls
was that beautiful?
open.
So good.
That the boundary that he was bound by this terrible experience from his past was released. That opening, which that's what human relationships do when they're at their best, is we open each other to the possibilities of more love, more understanding, more feeling of God's inflow.
So well said. I was thinking, this was an aha of about a year ago. And it's funny, like you get these ahas, and they've been staring at you right in the face, forever, right? And one of them was, Christianity's a relational faith. Christianity is all about Christianity does not exist outside of human-to-human relationship, which is fascinating.
Thank you, Chuck. It's also something I think about in terms of the challenges of our community, because we have this revelation that was written, but Swedenborg had friends, and he did work with others, but he didn't try to form community with those ideas. And I really feel like that's the essence of our challenge right now, is how to do that.
Yeah. And it is, as you were saying that, is beautifully said. I was thinking of that great Divine Providence 60 or 61, where Swedenborg says, there's a walking in away from the knowledge of it, and then a knowledge of it from a walking in the way. So that beautiful, and I think he really believed that. Like if you live this, that will become its own form of revelation too, as we live these things as best we can.
Right. And every time we live a truth, it's imperfect and messy.
Right.
So there's no.
It's totally, going back to Thich Nhat Hanh, right? The muck.
Hi, Denise here. I noticed in the film, as the judge was walking into the cell, the bed that he, the bedding came along with him, and I pictured, take up your bed and walk.
Oh, that's good.
But also, the other thing I pictured is the judge had given him a sentence. He had done the law, and then he went in, and he probably only listened.
Yeah.
He probably didn't have to say a whole lot.
No.
He listened.
No.
And then they went to sleep.
Yeah, right, went to sleep. And they ate meatloaf together. I love even that little.
First the meatloaf.
First the meatloaf, yeah. And a little bit, what you folks are saying, again, with the walls expanding, think of two people in that little cell and feeling less crowded, because you're not there with your fears anymore. You're there with a friend.
This is Martha. I'm just going to say I have compassion in the law. I think the law here is that we should say our names before we speak.
Oh, excellent.
And I see my very good friend, Sue Dittmeyer, hi Sue, on the computer there, and I think that she would like to know who's speaking.
All right. Very well, very, very well done. Yeah, it's right back. All right. Any other comments there, friends? All right. Well, thank you, folks, very much. You were a great audience, and we'll see you at 11 o'clock.